So my correction and the triquetrum tends to go lateral. So when a person goes, these two bones tend to go displace apart, right? So the correction, and this is happening on the opposite end, so it looks opposite to that, right? So I'm going to find the capitate. I'm going to put my thumb. Another thing that I'm going to do also, I'm not really going to go over this, but you guys should be very comfortable with like ulnar styloid process, and the radius. This is the navicular, this is the trapezium, this is the trapezoid, capitate, lunate, triquetrum, hamate, pisiform. So you just, metacarpal phalangeal joints, pips, dips, so you just know where all these things are, all right? So I'm going to find the depression in the capitate. I'm going to put my thumb on it, and then I'm going to just cover my other thumb on top of it, and then I'm going to displace this way. So I'm going to, as I take my slack, I'm starting to go towards the scaphoid, right? So I'm sliding kind of off the capitate, and now I'm on the scaphoid, or the navicular, and then I'm just going to kind of, make a thrust going that way. And again, most of these corrections aren't like big bull in a china shop kind of correction. Like sometimes I know the glenohumeral joint looked a little bit like that. Most of the spinal corrections look like, you're really like wrecking havoc. Most of the extremity joints don't have quite as much because they're smaller joints. They don't have big movements, so doesn't look like a big deal. And then to get to triquetrum, I can use the same thumb, but usually I use the other thumb because this is the hand and the thumb that's closer to it. Same thing. Find the capitate, cover it, push it this way, and then just kind of go like that. So, so this is taking care of that pattern of correction where the scaphoid has gone lateral and the triquetrum has gone medial, right, in an anatomical position. So it looks opposite because I've turned it over this way to correct it. So that's the scaphoid adjustment and the triquetrum adjustment that's written there. Okay. So the other thing that happens with the lunate in, again, an extension, correction, or fall, it tends to go anterior because that would be like this, right? Because again, it's taken from an anterior, or excuse me, a anatomical position. So it has more of a propensity to go anterior. And so the anterior correction, actually I'm going to show you the posterior correction first.
This is for the lunate?
This is for the lunate.
Okay.
Remember, the lunate is the most commonly displaced carpal bone because it's kind of on the swivel of how your wrist moves. And the in the lecture, it doesn't have as many ligaments to support it, so it's a little looser. So it has that propensity to mobilize or displace, rather than, I'm not really talking about dislocate, just displace or fixate. Maybe it off tracks a little bit, and then that can lead to kind of problems and fibrosis of repair and so on and so forth. So for the lunate, I'm going to find the depression in the capitate, the ulnar styloid process, and then I'm going to diagonally split the difference, and then that's the lunate, right there. And then I can go wrist flexion and extension, and I should be able to, I can feel it moving in there, right? It also, if you split the third and fourth finger and go back, you kind of end up in the same place. So using those two, palpatory landmarks, you can get to it. So then I'm going to use my thumbs and my index fingers to kind of, so the lunate will be pinched in between there. Okay. Now the correction for a posterior lunate, I'm going to kind of come up like this and then come down like that. Now, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, at some point or another had a stick with a ribbon on it, and you kind of went like that, and the wave went out to the end of the ribbon. So this is very much kind of like making that wave type happen. And so I often have dedicated the Devo song, Whip It Good, Whip It Into Shape, after this particular move. Now, once I've determined the location of the lunate, I'm going to have the patient lean back just a little bit, which opens up the joint space, right? And then I'm going to kind of come up and then down like that. And so that replaces a posterior lunate.
What are your fingers on?
The lunate.
Oh, they are.
My other fingers are just kind of hanging out.
Okay.
In the palm area. Okay. Now, when I make this correction, it's not such that I come up and then I, pull the patient over like that. It's kind of that discrete little snap. That, again, if you think of it in terms of the ribbon, the force kind of goes out and you get that little wave like that. Okay. So that's for a posterior lunate. The anterior lunate, I'm going to use either two different contacts. One is to use just the reverse contact. So instead of like this, I'm like that. And see, it's kind of more in a flex position, right? Then again, I'm going to have the patient lean back a little bit, and I'm just going to kind of pull, which makes it go anterior. The alternate contact, is the index finger is the same, but I'm going to put my thenar eminence on where the lunate would be, and then I can do the same kind of a thing. And it gives perhaps a slightly different contact, and maybe it feels a little bit more secure because you've got more of your thenar eminences on that contact. Okay, so that's for the lunate, anterior and posterior, and that's for the scaphoid and the triquetrum. So there is a little bit more kind of movement per se with the lunate. The triquetrum and the scaphoid, there's really not much. It's just taking your slack and pushing it one way, taking your slack and pushing it the other way. All right, so let's practice those off.